I'm not here to teach you what to think. I'm here to teach you how to think. Calibration to profession might mean someone will question your credentials based on something that has nothing to do with your credentials and being able to use your credentials to shut them up. I personally deal with this where in my profession as a relationship expert and educator on the topic of relationships, I have people who will question my skill level, my understanding, my information because of the way I look. I sometimes get a hate email from people who haven't actually even studied my material, but who'll say something along the lines of, "What could a fat guy like you know about this?" The fact that I've written as many books as I have, the fact that I've recorded as many of these lectures as I had, these are my credentials. This is what I stand on. The fact that people who have been students of mine have used it successfully and have changed their lives. The fact that my students never stick around for more than 5 years because within 5 years they solve their problems and they don't need to study relationships anymore because they've got the new behavior patterns they need. Despite all of that, I'll still have people question me in my profession because of the way I look. Comes with the territory. If they didn't question me for that, they would question me for something else. And in all of your lives, whatever profession you have, you better understand there will always be someone who's going to question your credential in the profession you have. You could have a PhD, and people will still question you. You might be in a position of authority where you have to oversee other people, and you have to enforce those rules. And sometimes in enforcing those rules, in making people realize their obligations and their duties to you as the authority in the workplace, you may have to use some chutzpa. A calibrated person knows when to use chutzpa and when to give them rope. As a calibrated person in the workplace, you also have to know when to show proper respect for anyone who has power over you. Like a lot of these things are intertwining with a lot of the other categories. The reason I'm presenting it as a very specific unto its own category is that the workplace may have rules and regulations that are not necessarily law, but have an expectation in terms of a code of conduct you must follow. And you have to calibrate to that. In one job I had as a security guard, we had a rule that we are never to lay our hands on the people living in the building that we're guarding. This includes when there's a medical emergency and we're not allowed to pick up anybody and carry them out of a dangerous situation. And then you get that phone call. Old lady has fallen out of the bed. Caregiver is not strong enough to lift her and put her back in the bed. What do? Do you go up and help and gently pick her up and put her back in the bed? Or do you follow protocol, and protocol says, I can't help you, you have to call an ambulance, and the ambulance attendant has to be able to come in and put her back on the bed and check her out? I'm not going to tell you what you should do in that situation, because you have to make that decision for yourself based on whether or not you're able to live with the consequences. But I am going to tell you that as a calibrated person, you need to at least know what you can and can't do and the consequences thereof. For example, in that particular situation, if the guard goes up and helps the old lady back into bed, even if nothing's wrong with the old lady and she's not hurt and she's not in pain, that guard could potentially still get fired for breaking protocol. A calibrated person needs to know that and then be able to accept those potential consequences. Calibrated person then thinks of potential legal liability. What if I help pick her up and I hurt her in the process? What if she's very fragile and I break her bone by mistake? This is why who has the power and legal liability are the first two categories I teach in the world of calibration. Just those two things alone can help your calibration skills immensely. The last thing I'm going to say about professions. Most people, in order to survive in their professions, have to put on a mask. Most people. Because they have an obligation to continue to work with other people that they wouldn't normally associate with. When you go into a work situation, understand that the person you see in a profession may be completely far removed from the person he or she actually is. And that's why calibrating to the workplace is so much more difficult. It's easier to follow protocol set by the workplace than it is to try and calibrate to a mask that may not really exist. Categories of calibration number 8. Location. Location, location, location. The way you're going to act at a wedding hall is different from the way you will act at a funeral home, which is different from the way you're going to behave in a private residence, which is different from the way you're going to act in a house of worship, which is different from the way you're going to act in a library, which is different from the way you're going to act in the workplace. Every location has its protocols, its social norms. When you're in a new environment, shut up and observe what other people do. Ask an authority person in that environment, what's the best way to conduct yourself if you have zero idea? I had a friend of mine who was